The billionaire didn't remember that night, until he saw her with a baby that had his eyes. Logan Everett had learned to live with ghosts, but this one had green eyes and a smile that felt like salvation. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Logan's penthouse office, each drop a tiny percussion against the silence that had become his constant companion. At 36, he had mastered the art of existing without truly living, moving through his days with the precision of a Swiss watch and the warmth of winter stone. His assistant, Mrs. Holloway, knocked twice before entering, their established ritual. "Mr. Everett, the quarterly reports from the Tokyo division are ready for your review." Logan didn't look up from his laptop screen, where columns of numbers marched in perfect formation. Numbers never lied. Numbers never disappointed. Numbers never died in car accidents on rainy Thursday mornings, leaving behind younger brothers who still called their voicemail just to hear their voice. "Leave them on the desk," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of distance that kept the world at arm's length. But as Mrs. Holloway's heels clicked away, Logan's fingers paused over the keyboard. There it was again, that face. It drifted through his consciousness like smoke, refusing to be grasped but impossible to ignore. Green eyes that seemed to hold secrets, a smile that whispered of something he couldn't remember but couldn't forget. 2 years, 5 months, and 16 days. That's how long it had been since he'd woken up in his guest bedroom with a splitting headache, dress shirt wrinkled, and absolutely no memory of how he'd gotten there. The company holiday party had been a blur of champagne toasts and forced networking, and somewhere between his third scotch, or was it his fourth, the night had simply vanished. Logan pushed away from his desk and walked to the window, watching the city blur through the rain-streaked glass. Manhattan stretched before him like a chessboard, and he was the king, powerful, protected, but ultimately isolated. He'd built Everett International from the ground up after his brother's death, channeling grief into ambition until the company became a fortress around his heart. Every acquisition, every merger, every calculated risk had been his way of proving that he could control something in a world that had shown him just how quickly everything could be taken away. But that face, that woman, with the gentle smile and knowing eyes, she haunted his controlled existence like a melody he couldn't place. Logan had convinced himself she was a creation of his grieving mind, perhaps a combination of faces glimpsed in crowded rooms, a manifestation of loneliness his conscious mind refused to acknowledge. After all, what were the odds that someone so vivid, so real in his memory, could exist without leaving any trace in his actual life? His phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. A text from his mother. "The charity gala is tomorrow, darling. Please don't cancel again. The Austin Infrastructure Foundation needs your support, and you need to stop hiding from the world." Logan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. His mother had been trying to resurrect his social life for years, convinced that the right event, the right person, the right moment could somehow bring back the son she'd lost to grief. She didn't understand that some breaks couldn't be healed, only managed. But something about this particular invitation felt different. Austin. He hadn't been to Austin since... when? The memory tickled the edge of his consciousness, elusive as morning mist. Before he could change his mind, he typed back, "I'll be there." As evening settled over the city, Logan found himself standing in his walk-in closet, selecting a navy suit with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. But his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie, a tell he'd learned to hide in boardrooms but couldn't seem to suppress in the privacy of his own space. The face was clearer tonight, more insistent, green eyes that seemed to see through every carefully constructed wall he'd built, a smile that spoke of understanding without judgment, features so perfectly etched in his memory that he could have sketched them if he possessed any artistic ability. "Who are you?" he wondered, not for the first time. "And why can't I let you go?" Logan caught his reflection in the mirror, tall, lean, with dark hair that had started showing silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked like a man who had everything and felt nothing, which was exactly what he'd trained himself to become. But tomorrow, he would go to Austin. Tomorrow, he would shake hands and make small talk and write another check to another worthy cause. Tomorrow, he would continue the careful performance of being Logan Everett, the billionaire who had conquered grief through sheer force of will. He had no way of knowing that tomorrow, his carefully constructed world was about to shatter, that the face he'd been carrying like a prayer was about to become flesh and blood again, that the ghost he'd been living with was about to reveal she'd never been a ghost at all, and that she'd been carrying a secret that would change everything he thought he knew about that forgotten night. The moment Logan saw her across that crowded room, he realized some ghosts aren't meant to stay buried. The Austin Convention Center buzzed with the kind of controlled chaos that only charity events could orchestrate. Logan stood near the registration table, his mother's words echoing in his head. "You need to stop hiding from the world." But hiding had become second nature, as natural as breathing. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, a gift from his brother on his last birthday, and surveyed the room with the detached interest of someone attending his own funeral. Architects, urban planners, city council members, and the usual collection of philanthropists mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their conversations a symphony of good intentions and tax write-offs. Mr. Everett, a woman in her 50s, approached with the practiced smile of someone who'd spent years navigating these social waters. "I'm Cordelia Haynes, event coordinator. We're so honored to have you here tonight." Logan shook her hand, his response automatic. "The foundation does important work. I'm glad to support it." But even as he spoke the expected words, his attention drifted. Something felt familiar about this place, this city. Austin held memories he couldn't quite access, like trying to remember a dream after waking. "Would you like me to introduce you to some of our featured speakers?" Cordelia gestured toward a small stage where a banner read, "Building Tomorrow, Community Infrastructure that Transforms Lives." "Perhaps later," Logan replied, already scanning for the nearest exit. These events were always the same. Polite conversations about tax incentives and project timelines, handshakes with people who saw dollar signs instead of faces. He moved toward the refreshment table, hoping to find a quiet corner where he could check his phone and count down the minutes until he could politely escape. But as he reached for a glass of water, laughter from across the room made him freeze. It wasn't the practiced laughter of networking. This was real, warm, genuine, the kind of sound that cut through crowd noise like music through static. Logan's head turned almost involuntarily, and that's when he saw her. Her, the woman from his memories, stood near a display of architectural models, holding what appeared to be a presentation folder in one hand. She was exactly as he remembered and completely different. More real, more three-dimensional than the phantom who'd haunted his sleepless nights. Blonde hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, and when she turned slightly, he caught the profile that had been burned into his consciousness. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath, green as spring leaves, alive with an intelligence and warmth that made his chest tighten. She's real. She's actually real. Logan felt the world tilt around him. For 2 years, he'd convinced himself she was a figment of his grieving imagination, a beautiful lie his mind had constructed to fill the void left by too much alcohol and too much pain. But here she was, flesh and blood, laughing at something a colleague was saying. He started moving toward her without conscious thought, weaving through clusters of conversations like a man drawn by invisible threads. His heart hammered against his ribs. When was the last time his heart had done anything but maintain its steady, controlled rhythm? But then she turned fully toward him, and Logan saw something that made him stop dead in his tracks. She was holding a baby, a child who couldn't be more than 18 months old, with chubby cheeks and curious eyes that were scanning the crowd with the fearless interest of someone too young to understand social anxiety. Eyes that were storm gray, eyes that looked exactly like the ones Logan saw in the mirror every morning. No, it can't be. The woman, his angel, his phantom, his impossible memory made real, looked directly at him across the crowded room. For a moment that stretched like eternity, their gazes locked, and Logan saw recognition bloom across her features like sunrise. Her face went pale. The presentation folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the polished floor. Her arms tightened protectively around the child, and Logan watched as every instinct she possessed seemed to scream run. "Sienna?" A voice beside her, an older woman with concerned eyes. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sienna. Even her name was beautiful. Logan watched as she whispered something urgent to her companion, her eyes never leaving his face. The older woman glanced in his direction, frowned, then quickly took the baby from Sienna's arms. I need some air," Sienna said, her voice carrying across the space between them despite the crowd noise. She was already moving, already fleeing, but Logan could see the way her hands shook as she gathered the scattered papers. "Don't run," he wanted to call out. "Please don't run again." But she was already disappearing through a side exit, leaving Logan standing frozen in a sea of strangers. staring at the space where she'd been. The older woman holding the baby looked at him with undisguised suspicion before following Sienna's path. Logan's legs finally remembered how to move. He pushed through the crowd with less grace than usual, earning annoyed looks from people he inadvertently jostled. By the time he reached the side door, the hallway beyond was empty, except for the distant sound of heels clicking against marble. He stood there breathing hard, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. 2.5 years of questions had just crystallized into one inescapable truth. She wasn't a dream. She wasn't a ghost. She was real, and she was here, and she had been holding a child who looked like me. Logan leaned against the wall, his mind racing through calculations he'd never wanted to make. 2 years and 5 months since that forgotten night. A baby who appeared to be around 18 months old, eyes that mirrored his own. Oh God. For the first time since his brother's death, Logan Everett, master of control, king of compartmentalization, felt completely, utterly lost, because the woman he'd been carrying in his heart like a secret had just walked back into his life, and she'd brought their son with her. Some truths refused to stay buried. They claw their way to the surface, demanding to be faced. Logan stood in his hotel suite at 3:47 a.m., staring at his laptop screen with bloodshot eyes. He'd abandoned the charity gala without a word to anyone, ignoring the confused calls from his mother and the concerned texts from Mrs. Holloway. Nothing mattered except finding her, finding them. The cursor blinked mockingly in the search bar. He'd tried every combination he could think of. Sienna Architect Austin, Austin Infrastructure Foundation Speakers, Community Development Sienna. Each search yielded hundreds of results, but none that felt right. None that led him back to those green eyes and that storm-gray gaze that mirrored his own. He pushed back from the desk and walked to the window, watching Austin's skyline blur through his exhaustion. Somewhere in this city she was probably lying awake too, wondering if he would come looking, wondering what he remembered, wondering if he would try to take away the life she'd built without him. 2 years and 5 months. The timeline played on repeat in his mind like a broken record. He'd done the math a dozen times, each calculation confirming what his heart already knew. That baby, that beautiful, perfect child with his eyes, was his son. His son. Logan pressed his forehead against the cool glass. He'd never wanted children. After losing his brother, the thought of loving someone so completely, of being responsible for another human being's happiness and safety, had terrified him more than any hostile takeover or market crash. But now, faced with the reality of a child he'd never known existed, something primal and fierce stirred in his chest. His phone buzzed against the silence. A text from his mother. "Darling, Cordelia said you left the gala early. Are you feeling all right?" Logan stared at the message, then typed back, "I found her, Mom. I found the woman from that night." The response came immediately. "What woman?" "Logan, you're scaring me." He'd never told his mother about the face that haunted him, about waking up with no memory but a lingering sense of loss that went deeper than his hangover. How could he explain that for 2 years? He'd been in love with a ghost. "It's complicated. I'll call you tomorrow." Logan Thorne Everett, don't you dare shut me out, not about this. His middle name, the one his mother only used when she was truly worried. Logan smiled despite himself. Cordelia Everett had weathered his grief, his isolation, his transformation from her warm-hearted son into a cold stranger. She deserved better than cryptic text messages. "I think I have a son, Mom. I think I have a son I never knew about." The phone rang within seconds. "Logan?" His mother's voice was breathless, hopeful, terrified. "Are you sure?" "No," he admitted, sinking onto the leather couch. "I'm not sure about anything. But there's a child, and he has my eyes. And the woman, God, Mom, she looked at me like I was her worst nightmare come to life." "Oh, sweetheart." The tenderness in his mother's voice nearly broke him. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I don't remember that night. I don't know what happened between us, what I said, what I promised. All I know is that she ran from me like I was dangerous. Maybe she's protecting herself. Maybe she's protecting the baby." Logan closed his eyes. From me, from disappointment, from false hope, from a man who might disappear again. The words hit him like physical blows because they rang with truth. What was he to this woman? To Sienna? A stranger who'd shared her bed for one forgotten night and then vanished into his privileged world. She'd probably tried to find him, probably spent sleepless nights wondering if she should even bother. And when those efforts failed, she'd done what strong women do. She'd built a life without him. "I have to find her," Logan said quietly. "I have to make this right. Just be careful, darling. Be gentle." If this is real, if you really do have a grandson I've never met, his mother's voice broke slightly. Don't destroy something beautiful just because you're afraid. After ending the call, Logan returned to his laptop with renewed determination. This time, he tried a different approach. Instead of searching for Sienna directly, he pulled up the Charity Galas program, scrolling through the list of speakers and exhibitors. There, Austin Community Development Alliance. The name triggered something, a whisper of familiarity. He clicked through to their website and his heart stopped. Meet our team, Sienna Blake, Senior Project Architect. Her photo was professional, composed, but he could see traces of the woman who'd laughed so freely at the gala. The bio was brief. Sienna specializes in sustainable housing projects and community infrastructure development. She holds a master's degree from UT Austin and has been with ACDA for 4 years. 4 years. She'd been in Austin for 4 years, which meant she'd been here during that company party. During that night he couldn't remember. Logan's fingers trembled as he scrolled further, looking for more information. The website listed ongoing projects, community partnerships, contact information, but it was the final section that made his breath catch. Recent projects, Sunrise Gardens, affordable housing development, completed 2023. The accompanying photo showed Sienna at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, beaming as she held a pair of oversized scissors. And there, barely visible in the crowd behind her, was an older woman holding a small child, a child with storm-gray eyes. Logan leaned back in his chair, pieces of a puzzle he'd never known existed slowly clicking into place. She hadn't just built a life without him, she'd built something meaningful, something that mattered. While he'd been drowning in grief and isolation, she'd been creating homes for families, building communities, raising their son. Their son. The reality of it hit him fresh, like a wave he hadn't seen coming. He was a father. This brilliant, beautiful woman had carried his child, given birth alone, stayed up nights soothing teething pain and first fevers, celebrated first words and first steps, all while he'd been completely oblivious to their existence. The guilt was overwhelming, but underneath it something else was growing, something that felt dangerously like hope, because she was real. They were both real, and tomorrow he would find a way to bridge the gap between the man who'd forgotten everything and the father he desperately wanted to become. Even if it meant facing the truth about why she'd looked at him with such fear, even if it meant discovering that some mistakes can never be undone. Sometimes the hardest conversations begin with the simplest words. We need to talk. Sienna Blake sat in her Honda Civic outside Little Sprouts Daycare, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Through the window she could see Aiden in the toddler play area, his dark hair catching the morning sunlight as he stacked colorful blocks with the intense concentration only children possessed. He has his father's focus, she thought, then immediately pushed the observation away. For 20 months she'd been careful not to see Logan in their son's features, not to search for traces of a man who'd vanished from her life like morning mist. But now Logan was here, real, and the careful world she'd built was threatening to crumble. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend and co-worker, Jade. Girl, you disappeared last night. Everything okay? Sienna stared at the message, her thumbs hovering over the keyboard. How could she explain that the father of her child, the man she'd been in love with for one perfect night, had walked back into her life at exactly the moment she'd finally learned to live without him? Family emergency, can you cover the Morrison Project meeting? Of course, but we're talking later. And I mean, talking. Sienna tucked her phone away and forced herself to walk into the daycare. Miss Dolores, the afternoon coordinator, greeted her with the kind of warm smile that had made this place feel like a second home. You're early today, honey. Everything all right? Just needed to see my boy, Sienna replied, managing a smile that probably didn't reach her eyes. Aiden looked up as she entered the play area, and his face transformed with pure joy. Mama! He abandoned his blocks and toddled toward her with that slightly off-balance walk that still made her heart skip with pride and terror in equal measure. Hey, sweet pea. She scooped him up, breathing in his baby scent, that perfect combination of apple juice and innocence that had the power to ground her when the world felt like it was spinning too fast. Aiden babbled something that might have been a story about his blocks, his small hands patting her cheeks with the casual affection that reminded her daily why everything she'd sacrificed had been worth it. She'd built a good life for them, small but stable, quiet but full of love, and now Logan Everett was back to complicate everything. Sienna? The voice behind her made her blood freeze, deep, familiar. carrying that slight rasp that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. She turned slowly, still holding Aiden, and found Logan standing in the daycare entrance looking like he'd slept about as well as she had. "How did you—" she started, then stopped. Of course he'd found her. Men like Logan Everett didn't accept mysteries. They solved them. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his storm gray eyes moving from her face to Aiden's with an expression that was part wonder, part terror. "Please." Miss Dolores appeared at Sienna's elbow, her grandmother's instincts clearly triggered by the tension crackling between them. "Is everything all right, dear?" "It's fine," Sienna said, though nothing about this felt fine. "Dolores, this is Logan, Aiden's father." The older woman's eyebrows rose toward her hairline. In 20 months of caring for Aiden, she'd never met his father, had never even heard Sienna mention him. But to her credit, she simply nodded. "Well then," Miss Dolores said with the diplomatic grace of someone who'd spent decades navigating family drama, "I suppose you'll want some privacy. The family conference room is available." Sienna wanted to refuse, wanted to gather Aiden and run again like she had last night. But she could see the determination in Logan's stance, the way he was looking at their son like he was trying to memorize every detail. This conversation was going to happen whether she was ready or not. "Okay," she whispered, and followed him into the small conference room that suddenly felt impossibly intimate. Logan closed the door behind them but didn't sit. Instead, he stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose that probably served him well in boardrooms but looked almost vulnerable here. "Is he mine?" The question came out rougher than he'd probably intended. Sienna adjusted Aiden on her lap, her son's warm weight the only thing keeping her anchored. "Yes." Logan's shoulders sagged slightly, as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. "What's his name?" "Aiden. Aiden Blake." She hesitated, then added, "His middle name is Thorne." Something flickered across Logan's face. Surprise, maybe gratitude. "My middle name." "I know." Sienna looked down at Aiden, who was studying Logan with the fearless curiosity of someone too young to understand the emotional minefield they'd wandered into. "I tried to find you, you know. After." "After what?" Logan finally sat, leaning forward with an intensity that made Sienna's pulse quicken. "I don't remember that night, Sienna. I don't remember anything after the third scotch at the company party." "I know you don't." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "You made that pretty clear when you told me your name was just Logan and you worked in business and you lived around here somewhere." Logan winced. "I was drunk." "You were grieving," Sienna corrected and watched his face go carefully blank. "You talked about your brother, about how he was supposed to be there that night, how everything felt wrong without him. You remember?" "I remember everything." Sienna's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You cried, Logan. You held me like I was the only thing keeping you from drowning. And when I woke up the next morning, you were gone." The silence stretched between them, broken only by Aiden's soft babbling as he played with the zipper on Sienna's jacket. Logan was staring at their son with an expression that made Sienna's chest tight. "I looked for you," she said again. "I went back to that hotel bar for weeks hoping you'd show up. I called every business with Logan in the directory. But you weren't just Logan who worked in business, were you? You were Logan Everett, billionaire, completely out of my league." "Don't say that," Logan said sharply. "Don't ever say that." "Why not? It's true." Sienna stood, needing distance, needing air. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Being pregnant and alone and knowing that the father of my baby was someone I couldn't even find? Someone who might not even remember my name?" Logan rose too, his hands reaching toward her before falling back to his sides. "I'm sorry. God, Sienna, I'm so sorry." "I don't need your apologies," she said, though her voice cracked slightly on the words. "I need to know what you want, why you're here." Logan looked at Aiden, who had abandoned Sienna's zipper in favor of studying this fascinating new person with the solemn attention of a tiny scientist. "I want to know my son," Logan said simply. "I want to be his father." And that, Sienna thought as her carefully constructed world tilted off its axis, was exactly what she'd been afraid he'd say. The most dangerous words aren't the ones that wound. They're the ones that offer hope. Sienna felt the air leave the room as Logan's declaration hung between them like a bridge. She wasn't sure she was brave enough to cross. "I want to be his father." 4 simple words that had the power to reshape everything she'd carefully built. Aiden, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift happening around him, had decided Logan's expensive watch was the most fascinating thing in the universe. He reached out with chubby fingers, making soft cooing sounds that would have melted anyone's heart. "May I?" Logan asked quietly, his voice rough with an emotion Sienna couldn't quite name. She hesitated, then slowly moved closer, close enough that Logan could extend his hand toward their son. Aiden immediately latched onto Logan's finger, with that surprising grip strength that all toddlers seem to possess, studying this new person with wide, curious eyes. "Hey there," Logan whispered, and Sienna watched something fundamental shift in his expression. The careful businessman mask slipped away, replaced by something raw and wondering. "You're perfect, aren't you?" Aiden babbled something that might have been agreement, his serious expression so reminiscent of Logan's boardroom face that Sienna had to look away. She'd spent 20 months avoiding these comparisons, but now they were impossible to ignore. "Being a father isn't just about wanting it," Sienna said, settling back into her chair but keeping Aiden close. "It's 3 a.m. fevers and teething tantrums and endless loads of laundry. It's choosing his needs over your sleep, your social life, your career opportunities." Logan didn't look away from Aiden. "I know. Do you?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Because you've been living in penthouses and flying first class while I've been clipping coupons and shopping at thrift stores to make sure he has everything he needs. I would have helped?" Logan's eyes finally met hers, and she saw something that looked like pain. "If I'd known, but you didn't know." Sienna's voice was getting stronger, fueled by 20 months of suppressed frustration. "And that's not your fault. Not really. But it's also not something you can just fix with a checkbook." Logan's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to fix anything with money. Aren't you?" Sienna shifted Aiden to her other knee, creating more distance between them. "What exactly is your plan here, Logan? You want to be his father? Great. Are you going to move to Austin? Scale back your billion-dollar empire to make it to soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences? Or are you thinking more along the lines of expensive gifts and occasional visits when your schedule permits?" The words hit their target. Logan flinched as if she'd slapped him, but Sienna felt no satisfaction in landing the blow. She was tired of being angry, tired of protecting herself against hope that might lead nowhere. "I don't know," Logan admitted quietly. "I don't know how to do any of this, but I want to learn." "Learning isn't the same as committing." Sienna stood again, pacing to the window where she could see other parents picking up their children, normal families living normal lives. Aiden doesn't need someone who wants to play father when it's convenient. He needs stability, consistency. He needs his dad. The simple statement hit her like a physical blow, because it was true, wasn't it? She'd been telling herself for months that she was enough, that her love could fill every gap in Aiden's life. But late at night, when he was sleeping, and the apartment felt too quiet, she wondered what it would be like to have someone to share the weight of parenthood. "Maybe," she whispered, "but he also needs to be protected from disappointment." Logan was quiet for a long moment, his attention split between watching Aiden and studying Sienna's profile. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, less controlled, more honest. "My brother died 3 years ago," he said. "Car accident on a rainy night, completely random. He was supposed to meet me for dinner that evening, but I canceled because of a work crisis. Some merger that seemed so important at the time." Sienna turned back to face him, recognizing the weight of confession in his tone. "For 2 years after that, I convinced myself that love was just another liability, that caring about people was a weakness I couldn't afford." Logan's hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "That night we met, I was at my lowest point. The anniversary of his death, surrounded by people who wanted to celebrate company milestones while I could barely remember how to breathe. Logan, let me finish." His voice was raw now, stripped of all pretense. "I don't remember what happened between us that night, but I woke up feeling different, like maybe I'd found something worth holding on to, except I couldn't remember what it was, or where to find it again." Aiden had grown restless during the adult conversation, squirming in Sienna's arms and making the cranky sounds that meant nap time was approaching. She bounced him gently, muscle memory taking over while her mind struggled to process Logan's words. "For 2 years I've been haunted by the feeling that I'd lost something important," Logan continued. "Now I know what it was. It wasn't just you, Sienna. It was him. It was this." He gestured helplessly toward their son. "It was the family I never knew I wanted." "And what happens when you remember why you don't do family?" The question came out harsher than she'd intended, but she needed to ask it. What happens when the grief comes back? When work gets complicated? When being a father stops feeling like a beautiful new discovery and starts feeling like a burden? Logan stood slowly, moving close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. the weight he carried that had nothing to do with corporate responsibility. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I can't promise I won't mess this up. I can't promise I know how to be the father he deserves. But I can promise that I'll try. Every day, I'll try." Sienna looked down at Aiden, who had finally settled against her shoulder, his breathing already deepening toward sleep. This little boy who had been her whole world for 20 months, who deserved so much more than the limited stability she could provide on her architect's salary. "I need time," she said finally. "This isn't just about what you want, or even what I want. This is about him, and he needs me to be smart about this." How much time? The question was fair, but it felt like pressure she wasn't ready to bear. "I don't know. A few days? A week? I need to think." Logan nodded, though she could see the struggle in his expression. A man accustomed to immediate answers being forced to wait for the most important one of his life. "Can I?" he started, then stopped. "Would it be okay if I saw him again? Before you decide?" Sienna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a decision that would reshape all their futures. Because whether she was ready or not, Logan Everett was about to become a permanent part of their lives. The only question was whether that would save them all, or destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build. Love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It whispers through the smallest moments. 3 days. That's how long Sienna had been carrying Logan's request around like a stone in her chest. 3 days of watching Aiden play with his blocks and wondering if he missed having a father figure in his life. 3 days of catching herself staring at her phone, Logan's contact information burning a hole in her recent calls list. She was sitting in Riverside Park, watching Aiden toddle around the playground with the fearless determination that made her heart stop at least 12 times per outing when her phone buzzed. "I know you need time, but I was wondering, would you let me buy him lunch? Nothing complicated, just, I'd like to see how he eats a grilled cheese sandwich." Sienna stared at the text, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. It was such a simple request, so mundane and yet so intimate. Logan Everett, master of billion-dollar deals, wanted to watch his son navigate the complex engineering challenge of eating melted cheese without getting it in his hair. Central Market Cafe, 12:30, 1 hour only. She hit send before she could change her mind. 45 minutes later, she was questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Aiden was strapped into his stroller, happily destroying a packet of crackers while she paced outside the cafe like a woman preparing for a job interview she desperately didn't want. "Mama." Aiden held up a cracker fragment, offering to share with the generosity that never failed to make her chest tight with love and pride. "Thank you, sweet pea." She accepted the soggy offering, checking her watch again. Logan was precisely on time. She could see him through the window, already seated at a corner table that gave him a clear view of the entrance. He's nervous too, she realized, noting the way his hands moved restlessly against the table, the way he kept checking his phone. Somehow that made her feel marginally better. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, but Logan had chosen well. The corner table was relatively private, and the high chair he'd requested was already in place. Sienna maneuvered the stroller through the maze of tables, hyper-aware of the curious glances from other diners. Logan Everett wasn't exactly anonymous, even here. "Thank you for coming," he said as she approached, rising to help with the stroller in a gesture that was both courteous and awkward. "This doesn't change anything," Sienna replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm still thinking." "I know." Logan's attention immediately shifted to Aiden, who was studying this new person with the same intense focus he usually reserved for particularly interesting toys. "Hey, buddy," Aiden responded with a babbled string of syllables that might have been a greeting or might have been a commentary on the cafe's acoustics. But when Logan smiled, really smiled, not the controlled expression she'd seen in business photos, Aiden smiled back. "Oh no," Sienna thought. "This is dangerous." Transferring Aiden from stroller to high chair was normally a production that required the organizational skills of a military operation. But Logan, despite his obvious inexperience, didn't shy away from the challenge. When Aiden grabbed his tie and tried to use it as a chew toy, Logan just loosened the knot and gently redirected tiny fingers toward the small pile of board books Sienna had brought. "You came prepared," Logan observed, noting the well-organized diaper bag, the careful selection of quiet toys, the sippy cup positioned within easy reach. "You learn fast when you're flying solo," Sienna replied, then immediately regretted the edge in her voice. This lunch was supposed to be about Aiden, not about her unresolved feelings. They ordered grilled cheese and fruit for Aiden, salads they probably wouldn't touch for the adults, and settled into the strange rhythm of conversation punctuated by toddler needs. Logan watched everything, The way Sienna automatically cut Aiden's sandwich into perfect finger-sized pieces. How she anticipated his need for more juice before he asked. The patient way she wiped his face between bites. "He's so calm with you," Logan said quietly. "So secure. He's a good kid. Always has been." Sienna handed Aiden another piece of cheese, watching him concentrate on the complex task of getting it to his mouth without dropping it. "Even as a baby, he was easy. Like he knew I was doing my best and decided to cut me some slack. You've done an incredible job." The sincerity in Logan's voice caught her off guard. She'd been bracing for criticism, for suggestions about things she could have done differently. Instead, he was looking at their son with something that could only be described as awe. "Tell me about him," Logan said. "I know that's a huge question, but I want to know everything. When did he start walking? What's his favorite book? Does he sleep through the night?" So Sienna found herself talking about Aiden's first word, which had been kitty, inspired by their neighbor's orange tabby. About his obsession with trucks that had started at 8 months and showed no signs of fading. About the way he sang himself to sleep with a wordless melody that sounded like sunshine set to music. Logan listened to every word like he was memorizing them. When Aiden dropped his sippy cup for the 3rd time, Logan retrieved it without being asked. When tiny fingers reached for Logan's water glass, he moved it out of range with the reflexes of someone learning to think like a parent. "He looks like you," Sienna said suddenly, then immediately wished she could take the words back. "He has your smile," Logan replied, "and your eyes when he's concentrating." They sat in silence for a moment, watching Aiden work through the architectural challenge of his sandwich. It should have been awkward, but instead it felt natural, like something they could have been doing for months. "Sienna," Logan said quietly, not looking at her, "I know you have every reason not to trust me. I know this is complicated, and I know I'm asking you to take a leap of faith with the most important thing in your life." "Logan, let me finish." He finally met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions today. I'm just asking for chances, small ones like this lunch, like maybe watching him play at the park sometime, like learning how to be part of his life without disrupting the beautiful thing you've built." Aiden chose that moment to hold up his remaining sandwich fragment, offering it to Logan with the same generous spirit he'd shown Sienna earlier. Logan accepted it with the gravity of someone receiving a state honor. "Thank you," Aiden said clearly, the closest his developing vocabulary could get to "thank you." Logan's eyes went wide. "Did he just—" "Thank you," Sienna confirmed, smiling despite herself. "He's very polite, usually." "Thank you, Aiden," Logan said solemnly, and Aiden beamed as if he'd just solved world peace. Watching them together, Logan's careful attention, Aiden's natural trust, the way they seemed to fit despite being strangers, Sienna felt something crack inside her chest. Not break exactly, more like expand. Maybe, she thought as Aiden reached for Logan's hand with sticky fingers that Logan didn't hesitate to accept. Maybe this could work. Maybe she didn't have to be afraid of letting someone else love her son. Maybe, just maybe, they could figure out how to be a family. The past has a way of catching up just when you think you've outrun it. Sienna was elbow-deep in dishwater, humming the wordless melody Aiden had been perfecting at bedtime when her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop. "Austin General Hospital. Miss Blake? This is Nurse Montgomery from the emergency department. Your emergency contact information was found with Mrs. Waverly. She's been brought in after a fall." Mrs. Waverly, Sienna's elderly neighbor, the woman who'd become Aiden's unofficial grandmother, and Sienna's lifeline during those early months when she'd been barely holding it together. The woman who babysat when Sienna had late client meetings, who brought homemade soup when either of them was sick, who had never once asked awkward questions about Aiden's father. "Is she okay? I'll be right there." 20 minutes later, Sienna sat in the hospital waiting room, Aiden sleeping against her shoulder, despite the fluorescent lighting and constant activity. Mrs. Waverly had broken her hip. Serious, but not life-threatening. She'd be in surgery for hours, then face a long recovery. "Sienna?" She looked up to find Logan standing in the doorway, still wearing a business suit but with his tie loosened and concern written across his features. "How did you—" she started. "You texted me," he said gently, pulling out his phone to show her message. "Emergency. Hospital. Don't know what to do about Aiden." She stared at the screen, having no memory of sending it, but there it was. Sent 47 minutes ago when she'd been frantically arranging babysitting and failing. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did." Logan sat beside her, careful not to wake Aiden. You reached out because you needed help, and that's okay. Sienna felt tears threatening for the first time since the phone call. Mrs. Waverly is my backup for everything. She watches Aiden when I have evening meetings. She's my emergency contact for the daycare. I don't know how I'm going to manage her recovery and work and… Hey, Logan's voice was soft but steady. We'll figure it out. We. The word hung between them, loaded with implications Sienna wasn't ready to examine. You have a company to run, she said. You can't just… Sienna. Logan shifted to face her more directly. Look at me. When she met his eyes, she saw something that made her chest tight. Not pity, not obligation, something that looked dangerously like partnership. I have the best management team money can buy, he said. I have conference calls that can happen from anywhere, meetings that can be rescheduled, and absolutely nothing more important than this. He gestured toward Aiden, who had somehow managed to sleep through the hospital chaos. Let me help. Before Sienna could respond, a doctor appeared. Mrs. Waverly's surgery had gone well, but she'd be hospitalized for several days, then would need weeks of physical therapy. The woman who'd been Sienna's anchor was going to need anchoring herself. I can take some time off work, Sienna was saying, more to herself than to Logan. Maybe Jade can cover my client meetings and I could arrange for part-time daycare. Or, Logan interrupted gently, I could stay in Austin for a few weeks. Help with Aiden during the day while you work. Visit Mrs. Waverly in the evenings. Get to know my son while being useful instead of just present. Sienna stared at him. You'd do that? I told you I wanted to learn how to be his father. This seems like a pretty good crash course. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was determination there, yes, but also something that looked like fear, as if he was terrified she'd say no, that she'd shut the door on this fragile opportunity they'd been building. Logan, taking care of a toddler isn't like running a company. There's no quarterly reports or predictable schedules. It's chaos held together by routine and prayer. I'm a quick learner. He's teething. He gets cranky around 3:30 every afternoon for no reason. He only eats macaroni and cheese if it's the dinosaur-shaped kind, and he will have a complete meltdown if you try to put his shoes on the wrong feet. Logan was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the same intensity he probably brought to merger negotiations. What about naps? He asked seriously. 12:30 to 2:30, but only if you read him exactly 3 books and sing the truck song twice. There's a truck song? Despite everything, Sienna found herself almost smiling. There's always a truck song with little boys. Teach me. The simple request hit her harder than all his earlier declarations. Because this wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic speeches. This was about learning the small daily rhythms that made up Aiden's world. This was about showing up for the mundane moments that actually mattered. This isn't a trial run, Sienna said quietly. If you do this, if you become part of his routine, part of his life, you can't just disappear when it gets hard. He'll get attached. He'll expect you to be there. Good, Logan said, because I plan to be. Aiden chose that moment to stir, his small face scrunching in that particular way that meant he was about to wake up confused and possibly cranky. Sienna automatically began the gentle back rubbing that usually eased him into wakefulness, but Logan was watching every movement like he was taking notes. Is there anything special I should know? He asked. About waking him up? He's grumpy for the first few minutes, usually wants his sippy cup in his blanket. Sometimes he cries for no reason and you just have to wait it out. As if summoned by her words, Aiden's eyes opened, immediately sought out Sienna's face, then tracked to Logan with the confused expression of someone trying to remember where they'd seen this person before. Hey, sweet pea, Sienna murmured. You had a good nap. Aiden's response was a soft whimper that could either be agreement or complaint. But when Logan offered him the sippy cup from Sienna's bag, remembering without being told, Aiden accepted it with the grateful relief of someone whose deepest needs had been anticipated. Oh, Sienna thought, as she watched Logan automatically reach for the small blanket, watched him wait patiently while Aiden oriented himself to this strange new environment. He's really paying attention. He's really trying to learn. Okay, she said, the word coming out barely above a whisper. Okay, we can try this, but I have rules. Name them. You stay in Austin for 2 weeks minimum. No flying off for emergency meetings or last-minute deals. If you commit to this, you commit completely. Done. You follow my lead with Aiden. I know him. I know his needs. And I won't have his routine disrupted because you think you know better. Understood. And if this doesn't work, if you decide being a hands-on father is harder than you thought, you tell me immediately. You don't just fade away and leave us wondering. Logan was quiet for a long moment, his attention split between her face and Aiden's sleepy contentment. "Sienna," he said finally, "I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." Famous last words, she thought. But looking at him, really looking at the way he held himself, the way he watched their son like he was afraid he might disappear, she found herself believing him, which was either the smartest decision she'd ever made or the biggest mistake. Time would tell which. Sometimes love grows in the space between chaos and quiet, in the ordinary moments that feel like magic. Day 3 of Logan living in Sienna's small apartment, and he was beginning to understand why parents looked perpetually exhausted. It was 6:47 a.m., and Aiden had been awake since 5:30, which apparently was sleeping in according to toddler standards. "No, buddy, we don't eat the banana peel," Logan said patiently, gently extracting the yellow strip from Aiden's determined grip. Just the inside part. Aiden looked at him with the profound betrayal of someone whose creative breakfast choices had been unreasonably restricted. His lower lip began to quiver, the universal warning sign that Sienna had taught Logan to watch for. "Quick," Logan muttered to himself, scanning the kitchen for distraction. "Truck song. Where's the truck song?" He started humming the melody Sienna had taught him, the one about big red trucks and beeping horns, and watched with relief as Aiden's potential meltdown transformed into fascination. Crisis averted, at least for the next 30 seconds. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and Logan felt a surge of gratitude for the automatic timer Sienna had programmed. He was learning that survival with a toddler was all about preparation and caffeine. "You're getting better at that." Logan turned to find Sienna in the doorway, her hair still mussed from sleep, wearing an oversized Austin Community College t-shirt that somehow made her look younger and more vulnerable than any of her professional clothes. "The truck song is surprisingly effective," he admitted, offering Aiden another piece of banana, "though I think I'm developing a complex about the verse where the truck breaks down." Sienna smiled, a real smile, not the careful one she'd been giving him since he'd moved in. "He loves that part. I think he finds comfort in knowing that even trucks have bad days." She moved to the coffee maker with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd perfected this morning routine through months of practice. Logan watched her add exactly 1 spoonful of sugar, no cream, and realized he was cataloging these small details the way he used to memorize market reports. "How did you sleep?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The apartment walls were thin, and he'd heard her tossing and turning in the next room. Having him here was disrupting more than just Aiden's routine. "Fine," she lied, taking her first sip of coffee with the reverence of someone receiving communion. "Any disasters while I was getting dressed?" "Define disaster." Logan gestured toward the high chair, where Aiden had somehow managed to get banana in his hair despite eating only 3 bites. "He's creative with his food distribution." "That's nothing. Wait until he discovers how far he can throw peas." Logan was beginning to understand that parenting was like conducting an orchestra, where none of the musicians had sheet music, and the instruments kept changing mid-song. But there was something deeply satisfying about the challenge, about learning to anticipate Aiden's needs and actually succeeding sometimes. "I have the Morrison client meeting at 10, Sienna said, checking her phone. "Should be back by noon. Then we can visit Mrs. Waverly together." "Actually," Logan said carefully, "I was thinking I might take Aiden to the park this morning, if that's okay with you." Sienna paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. It was one thing to leave Logan alone with Aiden in the controlled environment of the apartment. The park meant real-world variables, other parents, the possibility of judgment or accidents or any number of unknowns. "He likes the swings," she said finally, "but not too high. And he'll try to eat wood chips, so you have to watch him constantly." Noted. "And if he starts crying, sometimes walking around helps, or singing, or just picking him up and letting him see things from a different perspective." Logan nodded, recognizing the trust she was placing in him. "Anything else?" Sienna looked at Aiden, who was now attempting to feed banana to his stuffed elephant, and Logan could see the internal battle playing out across her face. Control versus faith, protection versus possibility. "His favorite is the red slide," she said quietly, "but he needs help getting up the ladder. He's brave but not quite coordinated enough yet." 20 minutes later, Logan found himself pushing a stroller through downtown Austin, feeling like an imposter who might be discovered at any moment. Other parents nodded at him in that universal acknowledgement of shared experience, and he wondered if they could tell he was new to this, if his uncertainty was visible. But Aiden seemed perfectly content, pointing at dogs and trucks and birds with the enthusiasm of someone for whom the world was endlessly fascinating. When they reached the playground, Logan helped him out of the stroller and watched him toddle toward the equipment with the fearless determination that seemed to be his default setting. "Careful, buddy," Logan murmured, staying close as Aiden navigated the toddler-sized climbing structure. It was a delicate balance, being protective without being overprotective, letting him explore while keeping him safe. First time at this park, Logan looked up to find a woman about Sienna's age watching him with friendly curiosity. She was sitting on a bench while a little girl about Aiden's age played nearby. "First time taking him anywhere alone, actually," Logan admitted. "I'm still learning the ropes." "Dad boot camp," the woman said with a knowing smile. "We've all been there. I'm Melissa, and that's my daughter Luna. Logan, and this is Aiden. He's gorgeous, those eyes. He must get them from you." Something warm unfurled in Logan's chest at the casual assumption that he and Aiden belonged together. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was playing pretend. They chatted while the children played, and Logan found himself asking questions he'd never thought to consider. Which pediatrician did she recommend? Was there a good parent-toddler music class in the area? How did you know when they were ready to transition from 2 naps to 1? "You're really invested in this," Melissa observed. "Some dads just show up for the fun parts." "I have a lot of catching up to do," Logan said, watching Aiden work up the courage to try the slide. "I want to get it right." When Aiden finally made it down the red slide, arms raised in triumph, face glowing with accomplishment, Logan felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't about proving himself anymore, or fulfilling an obligation. This was about being present for these moments, about being the person Aiden looked for when he needed encouragement or comfort or someone to share his joy. "Dada," Aiden called out, running toward Logan with the unsteady gait that was somehow the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Logan's breath caught. Dada. Not a random syllable or accidental sound. Aiden was looking right at him, arms outstretched, claiming him with the simple certainty that children brought to everything. "Hey there, little man," Logan said, scooping him up, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "Did you have fun on the slide?" Aiden babbled a response that sounded like pure happiness, his small hands patting Logan's cheeks with that casual affection that had the power to undo him completely. When they got home, Sienna was already back from her meeting, pacing the living room with the restless energy of someone who'd been worrying despite their best efforts not to. "How did it go?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "He called me Dada," Logan said quietly, and watched Sienna's face cycle through surprise, joy, and something that might have been grief. "He's never," she started, then stopped. "I mean, he said it before, but not to anyone specific. Not like that." Logan understood. Aiden had been using Dada as a general term for father figures he saw at the park or in books, but today, he'd made it specific. He'd made it real. "Are you okay?" Logan asked, noting the way Sienna was blinking rapidly. "I'm fine," she said, taking Aiden from his arms and breathing in his little boy scent. "It's just, I always wondered what it would feel like when this moment came, when he had someone to call Dada." Logan moved closer, close enough to see the tears she was trying to hide. "And how does it feel?" Sienna looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd walked back into her life, her defenses were completely down. "Terrifying," she whispered. "And perfect." And Logan knew, standing in her small living room with their son between them, that he was exactly where he belonged. The only question now was whether Sienna was ready to believe it too. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It tears you apart. It was Logan's phone that shattered the fragile peace they'd built over the past week. The call came at 11:17 p.m., just as Sienna was finally allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. "I have to go to New York," Logan said, his voice tight as he ended the call. "There's a situation with the Tokyo merger. My lawyers think the deal might collapse if I'm not there to handle it personally." Sienna sat up in bed, instantly awake despite having been drifting toward sleep moments before. Through the thin walls, she could hear Logan moving around the living room, could picture him running his hands through his hair the way he did when he was trying to solve an impossible problem. "When?" she asked, appearing in the doorway in her pajamas. "My flight leaves in 3 hours." Logan was already pulling his laptop from his bag, the businessman taking over from the father who'd spent the evening reading bedtime stories. "I'm sorry, Sienna. I know the timing is terrible, but this deal represents 18 months of work and hundreds of jobs. How long will you be gone?" The pause before his answer told her everything she needed to know. "I don't know. Could be a few days. Could be longer. Logan's fingers were already flying over the keyboard, checking flight schedules and hotel availability. But I'll be back as soon as I can. I promise. Sienna leaned against the doorframe, watching him transform back into the man she'd met at that charity gala. Distant, controlled, focused on everything except the life they'd been building together. The man who'd learned the truck song and mastered the art of banana distribution was disappearing before her eyes. "This is what I was afraid of," she said quietly. Logan's typing stopped. "What?" "This. The moment when your real life calls and we become the complication you have to work around. That's not what's happening, isn't it?" Sienna stepped into the room, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. "One phone call, Logan, that's all it took for you to start planning your escape." Logan closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. "It's not an escape. It's my job. It's how I make the money that could secure Aiden's future, pay for his college, make sure he never wants for anything. He doesn't want your money, Logan. He wants his father. I'm trying to be both." The words came out sharper than either of them expected, echoing in the small apartment like a gunshot. From Aiden's room came a soft whimper. Their raised voices had disturbed his sleep. Sienna moved automatically toward the sound, but Logan caught her arm gently. "Let me," he said. "Please." She watched him disappear into Aiden's room, heard his voice drop to the soft murmur he'd perfected over the past week. "Hey, little man. Just some grown-up talk. Go back to sleep." When he returned, his face was different, raw, like seeing Aiden vulnerable and sleepy had stripped away another layer of his carefully maintained composure. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, sitting heavily on the couch. "I don't know how to be the father he needs and the businessman everyone depends on. I don't know how to split myself between two worlds that feel completely incompatible." Sienna sat beside him, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. "Maybe you don't have to split yourself. Maybe you just have to choose. It's not that simple, isn't it?" She turned to face him and Logan could see tears gathering in her eyes. "Because I've been choosing every day for 20 months. I chose him over the promotion that required travel. I chose him over the relationship with the architect from Dallas who couldn't handle dating a single mom. I chose him over my own comfort, my own desires, my own dreams of what my life might look like. I never asked you to do that." "You didn't have to ask." The words burst out of her like water through a broken dam. "That's what love looks like, Logan. That's what being a parent means. You don't get to have it both ways." Logan was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "What if I lose everything I've built? What if I step back from Everett International and someone else takes over? What if I destroy my brother's legacy for a family I'm probably going to mess up anyway?" And there it was, the fear beneath all his careful control, the wound that had never properly healed. "Your brother," Sienna said softly. "Tell me about him." "What?" "That night we met. You talked about him, about how everything felt wrong without him, but you've never told me who he was, what he was like." Logan's composure cracked completely. "His name was Marcus. He was 3 years older than me, and he was everything I'm not. Warm, easy with people. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they mattered." His voice broke slightly. "He was supposed to take over the company. He was supposed to be the one people looked up to. But he's not here. No, he's not here because I was too busy to have dinner with him that night, because I chose a merger over my brother, and now he's dead, and I'm pretending to be him." Sienna felt her heart break for this man who'd been carrying so much guilt, so much responsibility that was never meant to be his alone. "Logan," she said gently, "you're not pretending to be him. You're honoring him. But maybe he wouldn't want you to sacrifice everything else to keep his memory alive. You don't understand. I understand that you're terrified of losing anyone else you love. I understand that work feels safer than family because deals can be controlled and people can't." Sienna reached for his hands, stilling their restless movement. "But I also understand that Aiden won't wait for you to figure out how to balance everything perfectly. He's going to grow up, Logan, with or without you." The truth of it hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they were brave enough to cross. "What if I stay?" Logan asked suddenly. "What if I don't get on that plane? What if I let the deal fall apart and focus on this instead?" Sienna studied his face, looking for certainty and finding only desperate hope. "Don't stay for me," she said finally. "Don't even stay for Aiden. Stay because you want to. Stay because you've decided that this life, this messy, complicated, ordinary life, is worth more than any deal." Logan's phone buzzed with a text. Probably his driver. Probably time to leave for the airport. He looked at it, then at Sienna, then toward Aiden's room where their son was sleeping peacefully, trusting that the adults in his life would make the right choices. "I don't know what I want," Logan whispered. "Yes, you do," Sienna replied, standing up and moving toward her bedroom. "You just have to decide if you're brave enough to choose it." She paused in the doorway, not looking back. "The car will be here in 20 minutes, she said quietly. "If you're still here when Aiden wakes up, I'll know you've made your choice. If you're not," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because they both knew that some choices, once made, couldn't be undone. And Logan Everett was about to make the most important decision of his life. Love isn't found in the grand gestures. It's proven in the moment you decide to stay. Logan sat in the back of the town car, his phone buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from his legal team, his laptop bag beside him, his boarding pass in his hand. The driver had already confirmed his departure time twice. 23 minutes to get to the airport, and he'd make his flight with time to spare. He could salvage the Tokyo deal. He could return to New York to his penthouse office, to the controlled predictability of a life measured in quarterly reports and market projections. He could go back to being the man he'd been before that charity gala. Successful, untouchable, safely isolated from the kind of pain that came with loving people who could disappear without warning. "Sir?" The driver's voice cut through his thoughts. "We should get moving if you want to make that flight." Logan looked out the window at Sienna's apartment building. 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. He could see a soft light glowing behind the curtains, probably the night light in Aiden's room, the one that projected stars on the ceiling and had taken Logan 3 tries to assemble correctly. His phone rang. The number displayed made his chest tight. His assistant, calling to confirm he was en route. "Mrs. Holloway?" "Mr. Everett, thank God. The legal team is waiting for you at JFK, and I've rescheduled your morning meetings to accommodate the flight delay. The Tokyo executives are standing by for your call as soon as you land." Logan closed his eyes, listening to the efficient recitation of his obligations. This was his life. This was what he'd built from the ashes of his brother's death. A machine that ran on precision and profit, that demanded nothing from him except the sacrifice of everything that actually mattered. "Sir?" "Mrs." Holloway's voice was concerned now. "Is everything all right? Tell me about Marcus," Logan said suddenly. "I'm sorry? My brother, Marcus. You worked for him before you worked for me. Tell me what he was like." There was a pause, and Logan could almost see Mrs. Holloway adjusting her glasses, the way she did when she was trying to understand why he was asking something that had nothing to do with quarterly projections. "He was warm," she said finally. "He remembered everyone's birthdays. He kept pictures of his employees' children on his desk. He used to say that business was just the excuse. The real work was in building something that mattered to people." Logan felt something crack inside his chest. Did he ever talk about having a family? Oh, constantly. He was always saying he couldn't wait to be a father, that he wanted to do better than your father had. He wanted to be present, you know? Really present. Present. The word echoed in Logan's head like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. "Mrs. Holloway," Logan said quietly, "what do you think Marcus would do if he had to choose between saving a deal and being there for his child?" The answer came without hesitation. He'd choose his child, Mr. Everett. Every time. Logan ended the call and sat in the silence of the car, the weight of realization settling over him like sunrise. He'd been so focused on preserving Marcus's legacy that he'd forgotten to ask what Marcus would actually want him to do. His brother wouldn't want him to sacrifice love for profit. Marcus would want him to be the father he'd never gotten the chance to be. "Sir?" The driver's voice was getting urgent now. "If we don't leave in the next 60 seconds, stop the car," Logan said suddenly. "Excuse me? Stop the car. I'm not going to the airport." Logan grabbed his bags and was out of the vehicle before the driver could protest. He stood on the sidewalk, watching the town car disappear into the Austin night, and felt lighter than he had in years. His phone was ringing again. Probably Mrs. Holloway. Probably his legal team. Probably a dozen people who needed him to be the man he'd been yesterday. Logan turned it off and dropped it into his laptop bag. The Tokyo deal would survive or it wouldn't. Everett International would adapt or it wouldn't. But Aiden would only be a toddler once, would only learn to trust once, would only have one chance to know that his father had chosen him over everything else. Logan climbed the stairs to Sienna's apartment, his heart hammering against his ribs. He let himself in quietly. She'd given him a key 3 days ago, a gesture of trust that had felt monumental at the time. The apartment was dark, except for that soft glow from Aiden's room. Logan set his bags by the door and moved carefully through the familiar space, guided by the layout he'd memorized over the past week. Aiden's door was cracked open, and Logan could see his son sleeping peacefully, one arm thrown over his stuffed elephant, his dark hair mussed against the pillow. He looked so small, so perfect, so completely unaware that his entire future had been hanging in the balance while he dreamed. "I thought you'd left." Logan turned to find Sienna standing in her bedroom doorway, wearing the same pajamas she'd had on hours earlier. Her face was carefully composed, but he could see the tear tracks on her cheeks. "I started to," Logan admitted. "I got in the car. I had my boarding pass. I was ready to go back to the life I knew how to live." "What stopped you?" Logan moved closer, close enough to see the hope she was trying to hide, the fear she couldn't quite suppress. "Mrs. Holloway told me what Marcus would have done," he said simply, "and I realized I've been honoring the wrong things. I've been so focused on preserving his business legacy that I forgot about his heart." Sienna's composure cracked slightly. "Logan, I called my team from the car," he continued. "Told them to promote Davidson to CEO effective immediately. He's been ready for years, and frankly, he'll probably do a better job than I ever did." "You gave up your company?" "I restructured it. I'll still be on the board, still be involved in major decisions, but I won't be running the day-to-day operations." Logan reached for her hands, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. "I want to be here, Sienna. I want to learn how to be Aiden's father. I want to figure out how to be part of your life if you'll let me." Tears were flowing freely down Sienna's cheeks now. "What about Tokyo? What about the merger? Davidson will handle it. Or it will fall apart, and we'll survive." Logan's voice was steady, certain in a way it hadn't been for years. "But I won't survive missing any more of Aiden's life. I won't survive wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to choose love over fear." From Aiden's room came a soft cry. Not distress, just the sleepy sound of someone stirring from dreams. Without thinking, both Logan and Sienna moved toward the sound, their bodies responding to the call of parenthood with perfect synchronization. They stood together beside Aiden's crib, watching him settle back into sleep, and Logan felt the last piece of his old life fall away. "Are you sure?" Sienna whispered. "Are you absolutely sure this is what you want?" Logan looked at their son, then at the woman who'd carried his heart for 2 years without knowing it, who'd built a beautiful life from nothing but determination and love. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "This is my family, this is my home, this is where I choose to stay." Sienna turned in his arms, and when she looked up at him, Logan saw his future reflected in her green eyes. Messy, complicated, ordinary, perfect. "Then welcome home," she whispered, and kissed him with the promise of all the tomorrows they were finally brave enough to claim. Outside, Austin slept peacefully, unaware that in a small apartment on the 3rd floor, a family was finally, truly beginning. 6 months later, some stories don't end. They transform into the quiet rhythm of a life well chosen. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of their new house. Not the mansion Logan could have afforded, but the 3-bedroom craftsman in Travis Heights that Sienna had fallen in love with. It had a backyard big enough for a swing set and a front porch where they could watch Aiden ride his tricycle in endless wobbly circles. Logan stood at the stove, attempting to flip pancakes, while Aiden provided unhelpful commentary from his high chair. "Dot a mess," Aiden announced with the authority of someone who'd recently turned 2 and had opinions about everything. "Dada's learning," Logan replied, rescuing a slightly lopsided pancake from the pan. "But this one's definitely yours, buddy." The past 6 months had been a masterclass in controlled chaos. Logan had kept his word about stepping back from Everett International. Davidson was thriving as CEO, and the company was posting record profits. Logan's role as chairman kept him involved but not consumed, leaving room for the life he'd never known he wanted. They'd moved in together 3 months ago after Aiden had started having nightmares whenever Logan left for his hotel. The transition had been surprisingly smooth, probably because they'd already learned to navigate the complex choreography of shared parenting. "Something smells amazing," Sienna said, appearing in the doorway wearing one of Logan's Oxford shirts over her pajama shorts, her hair pulled back in the messy bun that meant she'd been working on project proposals since dawn. "Something smells burned," Logan corrected, but he was smiling. "Coffee's fresh, though." Sienna moved to the coffee maker with the gratitude of someone who understood that caffeine was one of the essential food groups for parents. She added her single spoonful of sugar, no cream, and Logan felt that familiar surge of tenderness at knowing these small details of her life. "Morrison's site visit is at 10, she said, checking her phone. "But I should be home by 3. We'll be here." Logan transferred pancakes to plates, automatically cutting Aiden's into perfect finger-sized pieces. "Mrs. Waverly's coming for lunch. She wants to see how Aiden's doing with his words." Mrs. Waverly had recovered beautifully from her hip surgery and had seamlessly transitioned from Sienna's emergency contact to their adopted grandmother. She'd taken to spoiling Aiden with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost grandparent time, and Logan had learned not to comment on the increasing number of toy trucks that appeared after her visits. "Gamma!" Aiden shouted, as if summoned by the mention of her name. He'd mastered several crucial words in recent months: Dada, Mama, Gamma, Truck, More, and his personal favorite, No, which he used with the frequency and precision of a tiny dictator. "Yes, sweet pea, Gamma's coming to see you," Sienna confirmed, stealing a piece of pancake from his plate and earning a look of profound betrayal. Logan watched this exchange with the contentment of someone who'd finally learned the difference between being successful and being happy. His days were messier now, less predictable, marked by nap-time schedules and grocery runs rather than board meetings and market reports. He'd traded power lunches for peanut butter sandwiches, conference calls for bedtime stories, and he'd never made a better deal in his life. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Darling, can you and Sienna bring Aiden for Sunday dinner this week? Your father wants to show him the model trains in the attic." Logan smiled, typing back, "We'll be there. Fair warning. He's learned to say, choo-choo, and isn't shy about using it." The integration of their families had been one of the unexpected joys of the past 6 months. Logan's parents had embraced Sienna and Aiden with the enthusiasm of people who'd given up hope of grandchildren, and Sienna's mother had flown in from Oregon twice already, each visit involving extensive photo sessions and enough baby-proofing advice to fill a manual. "I have to go," Sienna said, kissing Aiden's forehead before moving toward Logan. "Try not to let him convince you that chocolate chips are a food group." "No promises," Logan replied, pulling her closer for a proper goodbye kiss. 6 months in, and he still felt that small miracle of surprise that she was his, that this life was real. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, the words still new enough to make his heart stutter. "I love you too," he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. After she left, Logan settled into the comfortable routine they'd established. Aiden helped with breakfast cleanup, mostly by relocating items to unexpected locations, before they moved to the living room for what Logan had learned to call free playtime, which was really just supervised chaos. The room bore the evidence of their life together. Sienna's architectural drawings spread across the coffee table, Logan's laptop open to emails he'd answer later, Aiden's toys creating a colorful obstacle course across the hardwood floor. It looked nothing like the sterile perfection of Logan's old penthouse, and it was the most beautiful space he'd ever inhabited. As Aiden built an elaborate tower of blocks with the intense concentration he'd inherited from both parents, Logan found himself thinking about the man he'd been 6 months ago. That Logan had been so afraid of losing control that he'd refused to really live. He'd confused success with happiness, power with purpose, isolation with safety. This Logan, the one sitting cross-legged on the floor, ready to catch a wobbly toddler or celebrate a successfully stacked block, was infinitely richer, despite having far less money in his personal accounts. "Dada, look!" Aiden had abandoned his blocks in favor of the picture album Sienna kept on the side table. He was pointing at a photo from Aiden's 2nd birthday party last month, all 3 of them covered in chocolate cake, laughing at something Logan couldn't remember but could feel in the joy captured on their faces. "That's us," Logan confirmed, pulling Aiden onto his lap. "That's our family. Our family." The word still felt like a small miracle. His phone rang, Davidson with a question about the Singapore expansion, and Logan answered it while keeping one eye on Aiden, who was now attempting to feed his stuffed elephant a wooden block. "Actually," Logan said, interrupting Davidson mid-sentence, "send me the details in an email. I'll look at it during nap time and get back to you this afternoon." "Nap time?" Davidson sounded confused. Aiden's nap time, Logan explained, and felt no embarrassment at organizing his business calls around his son's sleep schedule. 12:30 to 2:30, best thinking time of my day. After ending the call, Logan realized that this ordinary Tuesday morning, was exactly what happiness looked like. Not the grand gesture or the perfect moment, but the accumulation of small choices, small kindnesses, Small acts of love that built a life worth living. Aiden had fallen asleep against his chest, worn out by the important work of being 2 years old. Logan carried him to his room, the one they'd painted pale blue with clouds on the ceiling, and tucked him into the toddler bed they'd assembled together last month. Standing in the doorway, watching his son sleep with the complete trust that came from knowing he was safe and loved, Logan felt the last piece of his old grief transform into something else. Gratitude, maybe. For Marcus, who'd taught him what family meant. For Sienna, who'd shown him what love looked like. For Aiden, who'd given him a reason to choose hope over fear. Outside, a lawnmower hummed in the distance. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The mailman's truck rumbled past their front yard. The sounds of ordinary life, ordinary happiness, ordinary love. Logan smiled and went to answer the emails that could wait. To live the life he'd finally learned was worth choosing. Because some stories don't need dramatic endings. They just need the quiet promise of all the beautiful, messy, ordinary tomorrows yet to come. What would you have done in Logan's situation? Would you have had the courage to choose love over everything you'd built? And if you were Sienna, would you have trusted someone who'd already forgotten you once to stay this time? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.